Boswell and his staff here, facilitating with us here tonight. I would like to thank you for being here. This event is being sponsored by the Race and Reconciliation Group of the Race Movement Church. And our mission is to create relationships among diverse people in the community, raise awareness of prejudice and privilege, and work for reconciliation in a just society. For those of you that were here last month, you know that we had a wonderful conference here, and we wanted to find a way to follow up and take the next steps with Reverend Boswell and his staff. So we welcome them here, and I believe they have water over here. Is that right, Pastor Greg? Okay. The restrooms, are they available? Okay, okay. So
Got it.
the restrooms are out this way. You'll see the marker. And we will move forward and see what happens. I look forward to this, and I thank our panel and Reverend Boswell for being here with us tonight. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
It's good to be with you again. I thoroughly enjoyed our time together last month and was overjoyed when Sandra said that it would be a good thing to come back again and have further conversation. So thank you for welcoming me back to your group, Race and Reconciliation Rock Hill. Thank you for the hospitality of this parish, and Pastor Greg and this congregation for hosting this conversation. And thank you for just the hospitality in Rock Hill. I enjoy coming down here and being with you, so thank you for letting us be here. We had a very robust conversation last time about whiteness in America, the evolution of whiteness, the history of whiteness, where it came from, how it got to the point where it is today, what it is, how it operates, how it mutates, how it changes. And we want to have a continued further conversation tonight as I talked with Sandra and Margaret. It made the most sense for us to be able to continue that conversation by introducing you to some of our facilitators of Confronting Whiteness and to let you hear a little bit about their story and how the course that I talked about last time that I created has impacted their lives and how they've come to be facilitators and how it's working in the world and the groups that they're leading, in the hopes that some of you will consider participating in the course potentially at some point. And also just spreading the word about this work of confronting whiteness and why it's so important in this day and age. Just to set the stage for the context of our conversation, we're here in South Carolina, not that far from Charlotte, North Carolina. And in South Carolina and Georgia and Florida and Texas and a number of other states, there are lots of conversations that are being dubbed as anti-woke legislation that are intended to try to limit or curtail what is being taught in public school education, not just K through 12, but also in colleges and in universities, state-sponsored universities. Why I bring that up is not that I'm surprised by that. That's the way white backlash in American history always works. But what I'm concerned about is that there will be groups like this, Race and Reconciliation, in churches and Confronting Whiteness, will be the only groups that are talking about what really happened in history and telling the true story of American history, all of the ugliness as well as the good things, and so that we can take responsibility for what happened, because the public school education system and the universities are not going to do it for us. In some ways, they've never really done it, but it's getting worse now. And so that's why these kind of conversations are so important. So we only have one microphone, so I'm going to have to pass when we go down. So what I want to do first is give our panelists an opportunity to introduce themselves to you, to tell you a little bit about themselves before we begin to talk about their part in Confronting Whiteness. So if you just, panelists, if you just share your name and what you do and your connection to this, and then we'll talk a little bit about more how Confronting Whiteness has impacted your life.
Good evening. My name is Cindy Adcock, and of course, we're all members of Martinsburg Baptist Church. And no, Chuck's not. You don't work? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it's spread outside.
Okay. Well, okay, I'm sorry, just me. No, I'm just kidding. So I'm a member and I've been since 2007. And I moved to Charlotte to teach at the law school that was started and has since gone defunct. So I'm a lawyer and I have been working, my career as a lawyer has been around representing inmates on death row. So I came into this course with quite a bit of knowledge, but we'll be talking about how that still was not enough. So thank you for having me.
Hello, my name is Seth Pills. I work my daytime job as a barista throughout the week. I'm also an intern with the children and youth at Myers Park Baptist Church.
Good evening. I'm Chuck Collier. I live in Concord. That's why I don't go to Myers Park. And so I'm a community organizer, organizing around anti-racist courses, 2-day workshops. And and I'm retired.
Hi, I'm Kimbo, and I am a retired educator of 30 years, all underserved communities, and moved to Charlotte in 2012. And I've become deeply involved with anti-racism work over the last probably 3 years. When I lost my job to COVID, my retirement date to COVID, and I attend Caldwell Presbyterian in Charlotte.
I'm Christian.
Kimbo.
Okay. K-I-M-B-O.
Thank you all for introducing yourself. I want to start by asking you to tell the story of how you found out about the course, even if that's simple, and then why you decided to take it.
I don't have to go first every time. I found out about the course through church, and it was COVID. So I was early in COVID, and I was locked down, and so I was looking for things to do. But also, I had recently left my job, and I wanted to get more involved in my church, more involved in the community, and more involved in criminal justice reform, which, of course, is very closely related to anti-racism.
The world had fallen apart during the pandemic, and I had just joined Myers Park Baptist Church. I had heard of Dr. Ben Boswell's doctoral thesis was about how to introduce predominantly white churches into basically a course like this. And I didn't really know what that was, but I really respected Dr. Boswell as a person, as a friend, and I knew that, well, whatever he had come up with, I was really interested because I'm a snob and I like intellectual things. Well, I didn't know what I was getting into. And I really wanted to get back into church community. There wasn't really, the world had fallen apart, pandemic again, and it was a George Floyd protest, and it was a way of getting back to community, and I wanted something that was going to be deep, and it was. It was deep, not just in a, wow, I feel so profound way, but in actually deep within my own soul, the roots of whiteness, and facing that. And so that's what led me to it. And definitely, we'll talk later more about the changes that it brought.
And I heard or read, I guess I read about Confronting Whiteness or the course. And so I tracked down Ben and called him, got a phone appointment and called him, and I said, tell me about this. And he started talking to me about it. And I said, well, how do I sign up? Because I was really interested in that. So it's been, I've just learned a huge amount, and as Seth said, it's more interior work. You read and you discuss, but there's really a lot of time that you need to spend reflecting on what is this saying to me and how has this affected my life?
So I really feel that God calls us to different places at different times in our lives, whether we're 20 or 30 or 50 or 60. Like we all have different callings at different points in our lives. And so after 30 years of education with underserved and having a nonprofit that I've started with the kids that I taught, and that is still ongoing, and I restarted here when I moved to Charlotte. And I was facilitating these large groups, high ropes courses and stuff. And I felt like that was really called, and I was really making a difference there, and then COVID happened, and that all went away. So I was really prayerful and respectful and thoughtful and reflective about, I want to be still and listen. What's God calling me to right now? And George Floyd happened, and I've always been largely being underserved populations, about being thoughtful about that. But all of a sudden this happened, I'm like, this is bigger, and this is bigger than me, and now what? What's my now what? And so I was just really being prayerful and scripturally saying, be still and listen, Kimbo. Just be still and listen. God's gonna poke you. And so Ben showed up on this interview on television. I'm like, there it is. There it is. And so I enrolled in the course and took it. And we can talk more.
So I want to start with, each of you had already had some kind of anti-racism training, background, connection before you took the course. So I think it would be helpful for this group, and I know they've done some anti-racism work, to talk about, what were your expectations about this going in, and how did it hold up, and what was different about it from other anti-racism experiences that you had. And we're going to start with Seth.
I was I thought it was going to be more of walk through history and intellectual, just an intellectual thing like you see in a museum. Like here's just a hall of just different things you recognize these different things, and just the sense, oh, that's a date, that's a name, that happened. Okay. What I found was a very immersive experience. I was even thinking about Dr. Ben Boswell uses Black voices to speak to us, voices that as white people we generally ignore, that are not mainstream, and it's pretty much Dr. Ben Boswell's like John the Baptist, who basically immerses us and says, here's the Christ, listen to him. And that's what I expected to just, okay, I know this. I like history, I read history, but it was much more. There's use of art, there's use of media in multiple different forms. It's more community. There's space where we listen to each other and create space for each other, create space within ourselves. It's much more than just, here's just a book club. It's not that.
So for me, having been working on workshops and getting those into my community in Concord, when I heard about this, and it used to be called What It Means to Be White, and now it's Confronting Whiteness, I've been trying to work on my whiteness. And so I really found that it really, just the title spoke to me. This is what I need to do, this is what I need to be about. And so, as Seth said, it's unlike any of the anti-racist work that I've done in the past, because this is about a small group of people. It's about community. It's reading these authors and these poets and seeing these movies that are produced by Black people that comment on white people. So sometimes we get in an echo chamber, we white people, and so this is vastly different. And And again, it's, as Seth mentioned and I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's about this interior work that I've had to do in considering my whiteness and how that has affected my life and really how that's affected other people. So it's not like anything I've ever done before. It's a part.
I just felt like that I was surrounded by community. And like I had been in a silo by myself trying to do some of this stuff. Reading, Abraham X. Kendi was need to be anti-racist. And all of a sudden I was in a community of other individuals trying to discover what it meant more about myself and how to be a better proponent of anti-racism and confronting myself. And the confronting word is hard. And Chuck mentioned, like, what does it mean to be white? That's what it was originally called. But I like confronting better because it means I really have to look at myself and be deeply reflective. And that was profound.
I can't add a lot, but I will say that I came into the course, having, I first went to seminary before I went to law school. And in seminary, I was big on liberation theology, I took Black theology, and I then went to law school to critical legal theory, the real stuff. And of course, as a death penalty attorney, I litigate race claims. I talk about the racist system and how the death penalty is racist. So I came in well informed and well educated, so to speak, in a lot of different ways. But I will just echo what these people have said very, very well, and that is that it is different because it is interior work. And for me, it created this construct that's very helpful in understanding ourselves and the world, and that is that construct of whiteness. And it's separate from white people. It's whiteness. And that has been very helpful to me.
Thanks, Cindy. All right, so we're just on the cusp of this already. Let's talk about the first time you took it, and if you want to add now when you lead it as a facilitator, and we'll talk about that some. What happened to you intellectually, spiritually, emotionally the first time you went through it? What was the experience that you had as you went through it the first time? You've sort of touched on it, but I want to go a little deeper. We'll start with Chuck this time. Emotionally, I think I was angry. I was angry, particularly when I read James Baldwin and his point of view. And I thought, because of the injustice that we have taken for granted as white people. As I was growing up in Memphis, and so I'm 70. Oh no, I'm 76. So yeah, that's right. I live in Europe. So I was growing up. In fact, when Martin Luther King was killed, I was in Memphis, and I remember that. I've experienced that. And so so I'm reading James Baldwin, and I'm thinking back to that time. And so emotionally, I was just angry that had gone on for so long, and it's still going on. James Baldwin wrote in the 60s and 70s, early 70s, and the same thing is true now. The same things are true now. W.E.B. Du Bois, same things are true now. Howard Thurman, same things he wrote in the 40s, 30s and 40s that I read. So we're still doing the same thing, and we've got to get out of this. So I was angry. So spiritually, it was, I don't know how to describe it, except it was illuminating. The Holy Spirit was leading me through that.
so I really underwent a lot of growth in the first time. I would add that as a facilitator and having gone through later, I'm still hungry because I read every time and I'm still learning, and I expect I'll always learn. So it's really about discovery, even though I've read it before and had these experiences with small groups before. And so intellectually, well, it was just mind-blowing and broadening. Yeah.
So, I said the first time I took this course, I was gobsmacked. And somebody else said to me, well, you weren't gobsmacked, you were godsmacked. You're godsmacked because I just don't know what you don't know, And confession, I'd never read James Baldwin. And shame on me, because how could I not read such a prophetic voice in all those years, or W. Du Bois, or just on and on it goes. So for me, I was godsmacked. And then it begins to start to transform your life for me as a white person. And so it becomes my now what? What is my now what? And what do I know something about? And this is something that I've lived for a lot of years. Like, what do I know something about that if I don't take responsibility for it, it's probably not going to happen. So now I know something about whiteness. And if I don't take responsibility for my knowledge of whiteness, then who is? And, Ben talks about our sphere of influence. So that is my responsibility now, is to take responsibility for my sphere of influence with what I know in regards to whiteness. And so that led me to start to want to facilitate, because that was my now what. And it has, as a white person, it has spiritually transformed my life. I've always felt deeply spiritual, deeply connected, deeply prayerful, deeply faithful, reflective. But this is different. This was different. This was different in a spiritually transformative way that I don't know that I can adequately use words to describe. The connectedness that I felt to God and how I can serve Him on this earth right now, in a place and a time that our world needs. So.
I felt when I first, and throughout the course of Confronting Whiteness, I felt gross. I felt like the system of whiteness had really used me and told me something about myself that was completely not true. As a white man, tried to use me as a tool to propagate its violence. As somebody who did go to Bible college, and I went to a Christian academy where they taught white Christian nationalism. So it was when I intellectually saw and went through the course, I saw the world flipped on its head. And I felt really angry because of how much I had been lied to and how much I lied to myself, how much I had agreed to those lies, because they gave me privilege and they benefited me. I was angry at myself for being so duped because something benefited me by giving me power. So that's how I felt emotionally, angry. It's very easy as a white liberal to basically cast anger towards whiteness to just white conservatives. But in the course of Confronting Whiteness, really comes to a space of actually sitting with that anger, hearing the voices of the people who are rightfully angry at you, and accepting that, becoming responsible for that, instead of just deflecting or despairing or projecting towards some other person or group. And that's how, I guess, emotionally and intellectually went through it. Spiritually, I would say it's like a walk through hell, Dante's Inferno. You just go layer by layer each week, and you see another layer of whiteness. And I know this has been said, and I'm somewhat embarrassed I cannot quote the person who I'm quoting. But I would say that whiteness, in the course, it shows how whiteness is America's original sin, slavery, racism is. And it comes, you really go deep into that. And so I'm also thankful, again, spiritually, I would say, you cannot free yourself from something until you name it. Even though much of my evangelical Christianity has been deconstructed, I still hold on to the Christian practice of confession. We must confess the truth, and we have to name it to ever free ourselves from it. And so to name whiteness, to name it, and to layer it out, even dissect it within ourselves like surgery. It frees us. We never stop being responsible for it. We never can pay back the debts that we owe. But it does free us from lies. The truth sets you free.
So one of the things about the course, I would say my reaction is shock and awe. I was in shock and in awe. And part of that is being in awe of the process. Like Seth mentioned, it layers on. Ben has done a great job of having the course kind of start small and build and kind of crescendo and then fall back, so that you're not like just hit the face the first day and go home. Part of it, and I know this might be part of a different question, but part of the course is that we do personal racial autobiographies. And so there's this personal journey you're doing alongside, because you're doing the group work, you're doing reading and watching movies, and then you're doing this personal, racial autobiography. And for me, that was very enlightening, and something that has made me much more self-aware of how I move in the world, and what privilege I had. I always knew I was privileged, even though grew up poor, grew up obviously, not necessarily obviously, but as a woman, a little girl into a woman, and so I had lots of obstacles, but still, I was white. I am white, and so I have this privilege that I've really come to be. I think I'm aware of it all the time.
Thanks, Cindy. One of the questions that we ask every week in the section of our sessions, that's called 3-minute rounds, are 3 questions about the reading. How did it make you feel? What's most impactful to you? And what are you discovering about whiteness? So I want to start with Kimbo this time and ask, how has the course changed your views on what racism is and on what whiteness is specifically?
Can I pass? All right. So, whiteness, being white is not bad, but the social construct of whiteness is, and that is my take, that there's a social construct of whiteness that has been created over 400 years ago to say that we are better than. And it has repeated itself over history time and time and time and time again over 400 years to make whiteness what is best. And we have, as white individuals, created a system that has taking advantage of everybody else in this country, Black, brown, indigenous. So in regards to that with being racism and anti-racist, like there's a spectrum to me, and I'm not racist, but I'm not anti-racist either. There's a spectrum for all of us, and unfortunately, whether we're Black, brown, or indigenous, we've all bought into this construct of whiteness. And you can think about Tyreek Hill in Memphis, but that was an example of what the social structure of whiteness has done, which is so sad. And I don't really know if I'm even adequately answering this, because it's just so deep and so ingrained in each of us. And it's the water we swim in, it's the smog we breathe. You know, there's this little joke about these little 3 fish swimming in the bowl. These 2 little baby fish are swimming around, and the big mama or daddy fish swims over and just says, hey, how's your day going? The day's going good. So, how's the water today? And the big fish swims off, and the little fish goes, what the hell is water? You know, because we're all in it. We don't even realize we're in it.
Yeah, we're swimming in white water, all of us. And so, yeah, we made up whiteness. And for a long time, I think I was willfully ignorant. I didn't recognize that I had advantage, but I certainly did. I didn't, when I first heard about oppression, I just rejected it. I couldn't conceive of white people oppressing black people or people of color, but of course, that's what we do. And I mean, that's what the culture is. It's in the systems. So, what's the question? Yeah. So as I became aware of my whiteness and the white culture and the white supremacy that surrounds, I mean, that's what this culture is about, and it affects us all. And it's hard to shake. And you just have to look at it, you have to name it, as Seth said. And I can only say that I've grown a lot. I have a lot of growing to do. I don't have much time. So I say that facetiously because I didn't really come to this understanding and this knowledge for 7 years. And it doesn't matter that I grew up in Memphis. I could have grown up in Rock Hill, or I could have grown up in New York City or Boston or wherever. It exists everywhere. And until we face that, we're going to continue living in it. And until we stand up and say something about that, we're going to be complicit. So I've decided not to do that.
I learned through the course and through all the workings of God that has happened in the past few years, that racism is not just slurs, and racism is not just for your grandparents. Racism, whiteness, and this is more me coming from the course. It's a demon that we've conjured up. We called it here. It's a very real thing. Yes, I'm racialized as white, but I'm fourth Russian. I come from, I am about fourth German, but the people, my grandmother and others came here and they traded their cultures for a culture that only builds itself upon the oppression of other people, upon stealing from cultures by taking people and forcing them to work for them against their own benefit and will. And so whiteness is, yes, it's the water. It's in my mind all the time. I have to think, is this true? Or is this what whiteness wants? Is this what whiteness wants to see or say? And so whiteness, the course goes through it. Whiteness is power. Whiteness is mythology. I really think whiteness is a matter of faith. It's something us white people believe about ourselves. It's something we believe about other people. And as Christians, we need to deal with these matters of faith and false faith and bad faith as well.
I'll just add a couple of things. One being a story that sticks with me in our reading, and it's in the section, the very first section of the course is whiteness as property. And it's kind of a hard concept to get your mind around. It took me probably to becoming a facilitator to get there, but there's a story about a woman who was talking about her mother, and how her mother, and I'm not getting exactly right, but her mother and was black, and they lived in the black community, and on one side of town, was it Chicago?
Yeah, it's a Cheryl Harris.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's Chicago.
Yeah.
And so they live on one side of town, and she needs to get a job. She needs to make money, and it turns out that she is very light-skinned, and so she is actually able. She obviously was beautiful. She was able to get a job on the other side of town, downtown, in fancy stores, selling makeup because she was so beautiful, and everybody there thought she was white, and she pretended to be white so that she could have this job, and so that she could come home and bring money and support her family. And so that was really just striking me. So her whiteness had value, that she couldn't get any other way. And she was bartering with her whiteness. And the sad part is that she could not really be her full self on the job. She had to, pretend to be white and not tell them what she had to do, or say, or put up with about other people making comments. I'll just leave it there with that story.
Yeah, the thing that's so fascinating about white passing is, and why a lot of African Americans wrote about white passing in the early 20th century, is because it proves that whiteness is a lie. So it's so important to tell those stories, because if someone can pass, then it's not biological, it's not ethnic, it's not even skin tone, it's just a lie of power. So yeah, those stories of white passing are really important. I think our panel has done an amazing job. I want to give them one more question, and I want you all to get a chance to engage with our panel and engage with me and ask questions. As we're coming toward the 8 o'clock hour. My last question would be for you all on the panel. If someone was getting ready, trying to decide whether to take the course or not take the course, what advice or counsel would you give them as they were considering that? We'll start with you.
Definitely take the course, and particularly if you're white, in terms of skin color. And that always confused me as a kid too, by the way. I'm like, I'm not white. If you go to the crayon box, you get out the white crayon, you're like, wait a minute, I can't color myself this. It's a lie. It really is nothing. But buckle up, and it is a group process and an individual process, and both of them are so valuable, and as you've heard, it's life changing.
My advice would be to give yourself space. There's such a purpose of why we start with grace space in the course of the 3-minute intervals, the silence, but really space, because it is so much. I mean, once you realize that you're swimming in it, you kind of choke with it. You realize it's all around you, and there's really not really an escape, it's in you. So you have to take it and give yourself space, give yourself space to listen. It's so easy to just try to rush through things, or to kind of go into a panic even, or to just despair. But really give yourself space, give your emotions space. Give space to everybody else. People are in different parts of that journey. We're all on the same journey, really, all of us are. We're all facing it some way. But give each other space as well. It's needed. You can say space, you can say grace. It's really what you need. But that's what I would advise.
So it is a journey, and I'm glad you used that word, because it continues to be a journey for all of us. And as you say, we're at different spaces, different places along the way. And so I would encourage people, if the question is, if you look at the title and then you say, should I take this? Then take it, right? Because if you look at the title and you say, I'm not taking this, then okay. But if you're thinking about it, confronting whiteness is a filter for people, and some people can stand to take it. Some people are really led by the Spirit to take it, and so that's one thing I would say. The other thing, Seth said, give yourself space and pray about it. Pray about it, about whether or not to do it. That's one thing. I think if you're praying about it, I'm guessing you're going to be led to do it. And the other thing is to pray about what you're learning as you go along, and what you're doing in this small group, in this community, and what's going on inside you. So if you give God a chance to talk to you, I don't know about you, but my problem is I can talk to God all day, but the hard part's listening. The hard part, it's conversation, so the hard part is about listening and hearing what God is saying through this work, through this reading, through the poetry, through from the other people in the group. God, I ask you to reveal that to me, what you have for me in this.
So again, we're all called to different things, right? So what is your calling right now? Be still and listen. Be prayerful, be thoughtful. And it will be uncomfortable if you're white. And you're going to have to sit in that discomfort. But guess what? Sitting in that discomfort may be as close as you ever get to realizing what it means to be Black, brown, and indigenous in this country. Sitting in that discomfort may be as close as you ever get. And if you want to know what that feels like, take this course. Because that's a start. That is a very, very, very small start with that feeling.
Let's give our panel a round of applause.
Thank you for their vulnerability and honesty. I want to give you all a chance to ask them questions about their experience, about the course. I'm happy to answer questions as well, if I can. Pass this around.
So hi, my name is Norma, and I'm part of Race and Reconciliation. And so I want to thank you tonight for your transparency, for being honest and open, and now knowing that you're facilitators, you got to be facilitators. So let me just preface this by saying that I adopted my oldest daughter, who is white, and I reared my 2 biological children, of course, African American. So the conversation of whiteness in America has always been a conversation in rearing my white daughter. And when I first confronted her with her whiteness coming from a racist family, her mom was a crack addict, and which is the reason why she needed to be adopted. And so dealing with whiteness in America and having to confront that as she grew has always been a part of the conversation for me. What was interesting about the presentation tonight is I took many notes, but I'm going to start with the last one first. And that was when Kimbo, when you said whiteness in America is the water, and I wrote, it's the sea that we live, breathe, and swim in. And when you think about the sea, you can be several types of individuals on the water. You can be a swimmer that swims on top of water. You can be a snorkeler. You can be a diver that only goes to a certain depth. Or you can be like what I consider myself to be, I'm a bell diver. I'm putting on all the gear that it takes to go to the depths of where I need to go to get to the bottom, to see everything. And I believe that's what you all are doing in your process of going to the depths of waters. And many people only live on the surface of this whiteness in America. I'll just say a couple of other things that I thought was really wonderful tonight that you said, Chuck, trying to work on my whiteness. And to me, that like literally sent shivers through me, because I think that that's the problem, that most people are not trying to work on their whiteness. And so it's engaging conversations, not only as facilitators, but everything that we do every day in our life, no matter whether we're white or black, brown, or indigenous. Because I got all three. I'm white, I'm Cherokee Indian, and Nigerian. So I got all of that. But I'll just end with this. I thought that this was extremely transparent, and did have a couple of questions that I want to ask you all individually about what you shared tonight. So again, thank you for this, and it was wonderful.
Thank you so much. All right.
Hi, my name is Robin. It's kind of like a two-part. Any part in the course, did you want to quit? And if so, what made you continue? And also during the course, is there any part of you that was resistant to things that you were learning because of your unconscious bias or your lived life experiences, and the things that you were actually learning and hearing, like, whoa, okay, maybe that's true, but I don't think so. Like, was there anything, like, any kind of internal struggle, I should say, of like what you were learning or finding out, and were you receptive to it being true and you're wrong, or were you just like, that can't be true, kind of thing, and then come to find out, it's, what you were learning or what you had experienced was like almost complete lie. Just curious.
I think that's a fantastic question. You want to start?
In my group, it was led by Lauren Penn. She is amazing. And she is one who will not let you run away easily. But there were many that actually quit in my group. And so there was, or had promised they would do it and didn't. So there was a pressure of, is this going to really make it? Are we going to do this? I think there wasn't so much resistance for me as each layer freed me from something. And the analogies that go through my head, I don't want to trigger too much, but just it's as if I had been abused and I was finally getting something there, and I had caused abuse. Trauma happens both ways. So going through it was free, and I wished for more. The parts that were resisting, by giving space to those parts, even understanding things, you say, giving you space to even scream your guts out while you were screaming, asking why do you feel that way? And even that was a blessing. And after the course, not so much resistance, but what can I do now? And we're part of criminal justice affinity group at our church, trying to do abolition work, it's led to me to say, oh, this was my whiteness. What about my patriarchy? How can I deal with that? I need to free myself from that. Something I didn't say earlier was nobody says they're racist. Nobody says they're sexist. Even the head of the Klan doesn't claim to be racist. But by actually saying, hey, the possibility that there's something I need to free myself from, I would only wish to go further. I wish to be completely free. And I wish that freedom for everyone else.
So the answer to the first one.
Just go. Let's get more interested.
The answer to the first question is, did you think about quitting? No. One of the things that the Holy Spirit has been doing with me for the last 6 years is give me a hunger and thirst to learn more. And to learn more about my whiteness, and not just knowing then, but changing, and seeing through a different eye, a different lens. I think that many people, I won't say most, but many people, it's not easy to face this. It's just not. For white people, it's not easy to face this. So I don't know that it's a struggle, but it's something, it's a new awareness. I never rejected what I was learning is, well, that's just not true. That's just that writer. I didn't. I tried to, God gave me an open mind to this, I think. And so I just absorbed it. I wanted to learn more, absorb more, and process more.
That's a pretty good question.
It's a great question. I will say from my experience as a creator and somebody who's facilitated 20 of these now, I think the one that usually gets folks is Malcolm X. So by the second session is whiteness as evil, and you read Malcolm X, and that usually shakes people up. Yeah.
That was my favorite.
Let's give him a favorite. I always get some resistance that week to some of the things that he says. People say, "Oh, that can't be true," and then they go Google it, and it turns out to be true.
I would like to know your upbringing, as far as your upbringing. Did anything trigger you because your upbringing made you raised to decide to go into taking a course, taking a class? Because everybody is raised different, or your neighborhood, or you have a friend, a buddy. A lot of times, a lot of it depends on your neighborhood or your friend or school that you went to. So I want to know if any of that played a part of you taking the class, enjoying the class. And as you were talking, I remember in the 60s, I read this book. Some of you have probably heard of it, Black Men. Okay, you read that. Okay, so I read that book, Black Men, which is interesting. I don't know if you've ever heard of it or not. And Elvis Cleveland, Solo Lives. So these are some of the books I read in the 60s, which is good to read. But with the compassion that you have, I'm curious to know your upbringing that play a great role in you deciding to take a class.
They should have this at their fingertips because they all have to write a racial autobiography about their childhood relationship to race. So.
One of the things I had to confront in the course was realizing that my grandparents, they were my safety net. They were the ones that we would go to when we needed a place to stay. And my mom and I, that they were very racist. And just think, how is it that I was raised by racist in Georgia? I grew up in Georgia. How is it I was raised by racist people, and then where I am today, kind of thing. And this may sound hokey, but it's Jesus. I mean, Jesus, as a child, I took Jesus seriously, and as I grew up, I just couldn't understand any other way to be, you know, because Jesus was so accepting. So,
It's kind of like Noah when he built the ark. He was also saying that the world was condemned. And so when you join the course, there's a fear. It's like, and all my family thinking, why are you taking the course? You say we're racist? Like, that happens. And it's true. But
yeah, my
saying,
mom listened to me.
yes.
She can't hear.
Yeah. And my background, like, it's like, well, we have black friends. We've done so much. We've invited them to our church and yada, 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 yada. And so it's really, even in that, it's free of saying, I'm going to take it and I'm going to go a different path. Sometimes it separates you as a white person from other white people.
I agree with that. Yeah, some of my white friends are tired of me talking about whiteness. So I grew up in Jim Crow South, 50s and 60s. And my parents were always careful not to let us use the N-word, but I did hear their friends use the N-word, and they didn't tell them anything, right? So they were complicit, of course. But I went to I grew up in I was privileged to grow up in a white neighborhood, went to a white school, white church, white country club. So we were staunchly middle class, and both my parents were well educated. So I'm just the epitome of white advantage. And so it just, I can only, so how did I get this way that I am now? The hand of God. You remember Keith Lamont Scott was killed in September 2016. That did it. That started to understand, why are people in Charlotte saying, I thought we had good race relations in Charlotte. Why were they saying, what do these people want, and why are they so angry? I thought, whoa. And so I began, that's when the Holy Spirit just really worked on me and got me to read and think and talk and go to workshops and try to make myself aware.
I don't know his dad. I don't want to share if I don't want to share, but I want to know myself better. I want to be better. I want to be who God made me to be. And if that means realizing what it means to be white, and not saying I have black friends, I have friends. And I don't know their story because I didn't know my own. And if I don't know my own, then how can I even begin to be in compassionate relationship with my black and brown friends?
My question is, in taking the course, now what after the course? For years I've been in and out of the courses, diversity. But what do we do when we go home? Have you talked with friends, neighbors, colleagues, young people, in trying to get them interested in taking the same course and seeing themselves for who they are or may have been?
Great question. Anyone want to answer that? Kimberly?
I've lost friends because I don't want to hear it anymore. And that's okay with me. God places a small heart, and as Chuck said, people get tired of hearing about it. And that's okay, because I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going anywhere. This is God's calling, and this is what, if we're gonna live into our community with each other, with God, and how can I not say something? And so as Ben says in this course, your sphere of influence. And that sphere of influence is what I already have, but that is gonna keep growing. Because God's gonna place this on our hearts, and it's just gonna keep on growing. And it's not easy. You have to be courageous, you have to be brave, you have to be strong. There's tears, there's sadness, there's grief, because people don't hear it anymore. And that's okay. And that's okay.
Yeah, and with regard to that, they're just not ready, you know? And so I want to help them be ready to start wondering and questioning why are things the way they are? And so, like Kimbo, I'm continuing on and talking to people. And so in my church, I've started the group in my church. I was a facilitator for about 6 of us in my church, and so I've tried to continue doing that. So what am I doing? That's what I'm doing. I'm facilitating this, but I'm also active in the community and working on other things, low income affordable housing. I mean, so that having this knowledge of whiteness and how it is so powerful and how it is so wrong really helps me in that work.
So the question is how we talk to our communities and how we go forward. So same, I've lost friends. I've had some really interesting family discussions. I have had to give space from one family until they're ready or until they stop harassing me. It has led to praxis of abolition work. It's led to how do I help people who are criminalized, either racialized or criminalized. I've been given privilege. How do I do what Jesus did and take what this world treats as last and make it first? How to flip the tables on myself. And so it's come to helping people who are unhoused, because a majority of people who are unhoused are people of color, are LGBTQ plus people. It's come to going on pilgrimage to Legacy Museum. It's a fire in me now. I really, after it was done, one of the last questions, what are you going to do with this that you've been given? And I know as white people, we often have despair that nothing can be done because we haven't done anything. The level of what's possible, we have not pushed it. But that fire, I would be condemned if I was to ignore it. I would destroy myself of my humanity. And humanity, I say, that's Jesus Christ, his humanity. And so I can't let it go, because I would be lost.
I hear you about talk. We do a lot of talking. I think as you've heard here, this is a process, a growth process, not just, let's talk about this for a while. And for me, it's been interesting because on a personal level, I've volunteering a lot of time working on criminal justice reform in Charlotte, and with one organization particularly that is a coming together of black and white to make a difference. So I'm hopeful about that. And on a church level, it's been an interesting journey. You know, it's been a hard journey for Ben. And it's been a hard journey for our church, for Ben to be so forward and honest and consistent with this. And so, you know, some what I do is just standing up for Ben. And,
I'm so sorry.
and of course, yeah. But that's needed. I mean, it's part of it.
Thank you, Cindy. One of the things I want to just say before we answer some more questions is, I hope you can hear the willingness to potentially sacrifice relationship with family and friends. That's an indication to me, as I've done this work, it's an indication that someone has really got it. Because white solidarity is the most powerful thing that must be broken. White solidarity would have you prioritize all your white relationships over every other relationship that you have. And where I find that to be, as Cindy pointed out, and just sort of open the door for me as I'll walk in, is that in the church, that's white solidarity in the church is the most difficult to bring. So when I bring up, hey, we're going to keep going down this road on confronting whiteness, when I hear somebody says, well, but John might leave if we keep doing this. And I say, well, what's wrong with that? And they say, well, John's my friend. I've known John for 50 years. And John and I go to vacation every year with our wives together. And John's really important to me. And if confronting whiteness means that John doesn't go to church here, then I don't know if I can support confronting whiteness. So this is someone who imagines themselves to be anti-racist, saying that. Because for them, white solidarity, white friendship, white family is more important than black lives and freedom and liberation. And I have to remember, I've been thinking about this text from Jesus a lot, where he's asked, his mother comes to see him, he says, who are my mother and brother? He says, I came to bring a sword that will divide father from daughter, mother from son, brother from sister, husband from wife. And it's a very hard teaching. A lot of us don't know what to do with it. We think, what's that mean? But when you start doing anti-racism work, you find out very quickly. If you really do believe in this, that is his gospel, that what we're doing is gospel work for the sake of liberation and love in the world, then sometimes it's going to mean you are prioritizing confronting whiteness and anti-racism over your own blood, your family, your friends. And that's something that most white churches can't understand. How could we possibly make Sheila feel like she can't be here anymore? Because she doesn't like this program, because she doesn't think she's not there yet. And so there's a constant attempt to water down and to soften and to go back into denial, to give white people lots of space to go into denial and make worship services nice and wonderful and happy so that people don't have to hear about political issues or race or things that make them feel uncomfortable. But again, a lot of that has to do with the way in which white solidarity tries to circle the wagons anytime this subject matter comes up and try to make it go away as quickly as possible for the sake of protecting white power and white privilege. So, I think what I would say about the panelists tonight is that each of them is figuring out in their own way what it means to be a race traitor. I use that language very intentionally. There's a scholar named Noel Ignatieff who wrote a book called How the Irish Became White, who said, and we used this on a t-shirt at the conference, treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity. Treason to whiteness is loyalty to humanity. And so we have to become traitors to the very thing that we have been born into, assimilated into, conditioned into, and only by being traitors to that do we find ourselves in deeper solidarity with people of color, vulnerable, marginalized, and humanity itself. So I think what you're seeing is each of these panelists try to figure out in their own way, in their own context, in their own sphere, how to be race traitors. And it's not easy. It's very, very hard. If we pretend it's easy, we're just lying. It's not, that's not it. Are there other questions tonight? Yes.
I just have a comment.
Here, use the mic.
Your name came up this morning, yours truly, during a Zoom meeting. And I was trying to pump your books. And I said, had he written this in the 60s during the civil rights movement, Benjamin Boswell probably would have been persecuted by his own people. It takes courage, and you cannot do this and step out without God, because all of us are born with an assignment. And knowing this, and when we accept that assignment, we know that God is behind us. So I see all of you here, and many others who are not here, being willing to be disciples, be John the Baptist, to be Saul, whose name was changed to Paul. That's what I see, and that is the only way to have the humanity that God wants us to have for one another.
Amen. Question over here?
Hi. So during COVID, I kind of hunkered down and did a lot of history. And one of the books I discovered was Heather Cox Richardson. She's a Boston historian. How the South won the Civil War. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure if that's something that you've read, but as a Black woman growing up here in the Jim Crow South, running to the Northeast in Boston, where I spent much of my adult life, it was the first time. I always knew that racism, whiteness was a social construct, and she does a great job of taking you through the history of how you had to become white to be American, if you were white. And so I guess I don't really have a question, but I do want to share that I am hopeful to have white people having this conversation among themselves, because I've always been a reader of James Baldwin, Richard Wright, and for the life of me, I could not understand how white people could think that they were better than Black people because of the color of their skins. And so this book helped me a lot. And I appreciate that I appreciate the story about the water. We're all swimming in it. And I'm tired of being angry. I want to see difference. And so I love that you are doing this work as spiritual work, because that does make the difference. And so my question, as I'm going to close again, is, how do we speak to this this woke politics that is so loud and so everywhere? And we have a school meeting over here where the real work needs to happen.
Question, amazing. Anybody want to take on anti-wokeness tonight? Anti-woke legislation? No? See anybody eager? Every time there's even the potential, or even what I would say is the simulation of Black progress, because I don't think what happened after George Floyd changed the lives of Black Americans. I think we had a lot of performative painting of streets and changing street names, and no actual real
legal or political or civil right changes for black people, black Americans. I think a lot of streets were painted. And we know now from studies that America is racist, more racist today than they were before the murder of George Floyd, which means that all the largest protests in American history led to a reversion and a regression. Now, if you're my age and a lot of my friends, that's very surprising. And most of them have not caught up to that yet. They don't understand what happened. But once you start to do the reading, you start to go through this course and you immerse yourself in the study and read books like Cox's book, you come to realize every time there's been any form of black advancement, every time there's always white backlash. Every single time. And that is the history of violence in America toward black communities, Tulsa, Rosewood, some in South Carolina. There has been, when emancipation took place, there was a massive backlash, the invention of the KKK, lynching, Reconstruction failed because of white politics. And where did we end up, right? And then we ended up with segregation. Every time there's any kind of black advancement, there is white backlash. Look at the white backlash to the civil rights movement. We barely even scratched the surface of understanding it. Look at what took place after the death of Malcolm X, for instance. Let's start in 1963. How many black leaders were murdered between 1963 and 1970? How many black leaders were killed and assassinated? By our own government. We know now that Malcolm X was killed by the FBI, that it was not just his own people, that again, just like Fred Hampton, they were bought off by the FBI. So we know now that there's been a consistent effort. That was the sort of the FBI's form of white backlash. So let's go ahead and speed up, right? Look at 2016, right? We had a black president for what, 8 years? What was white backlash to that? What that? Come on, right? We had a black freedom movement after George Floyd's murder, and we got an insurrection 6 months later. Every single time there's any, even just the idea of black advancement, not the reality, just the idea of it. And that's of symbol, that's revealing to what whiteness is. Whiteness is domination, oppression, violence, power, constant power. And any threat to that power, there will be a massive reaction. So calculate on it. Organizers have to organize with that in mind, aware that that's always going to come. So what we're living through, I want to make sure we talk about anti-wokeness is just pro-murder. Anti-wokeness is just pro-murder. That's all it is. It's just another form of we're okay with premature death for people of color, And so we're going to continue to promote these laws because we're okay with the current status where racial outcomes lead to black people dying before white people in the same communities, let alone in different communities, right? The black mortality rate for women who are giving birth has gone up, right? So we have to reckon with that. We have to just say basically any anti-woke legislation is an attempt to continue oppression. That's all it is. Furtherance of oppression, where they're anti-woke, but they're pro-oppression. That's what that means. Pro-oppression, pro-racism, pro-persecution and domination. And we have to keep saying that over and over and over again and not play these games about wokeness that folks want to play. Well, what is, did you see that woman on TikTok? What is wokeness? Couldn't even define what she meant by it. Just throwing it out there. Now it's just a talking point. Just like CRT was. It's just a talking point. They don't actually know what critical race theory is. Cindy had to take that class, right? But these folks don't even know what critical race theory actually is. They're just throwing it around there. And this is one of the things I've learned as a child. I did not understand as a teenager, adult, young adult. Every one of these little ideas that every one of these things that become a big political problem, critical race theory, anti-woke legislation, banning books, they all start usually with a white Christian somewhere upset. That's who came up with that CRT thing. Some white professor nobody ever read or heard of at some white university that nobody ever heard of, decided to find a way to get on Tucker Carlson. This is what literally happened. Got on Tucker Carlson and started talking about critical race theory. Tucker Carlson didn't know what critical race theory was, still doesn't.
Right.
Didn't know then. Trump didn't know what critical race theory is, still doesn't. But some white professor who thought they knew got on Tucker Carlson and started a process. This is why rhetoric matters so much. When people just start saying words can be violence, words can kill. So I think we have to be very vigilant against anti-woke legislation, anti-woke ideas. And I mean, this doesn't mean that white liberals, for instance, are geniuses and should always be trusted. Let's be honest, because the whole course is about white liberals being, disingenuous and dangerous. So that's part of our work, is to learn how we show up in ways and become. So that doesn't mean just because we're not for anti-woke legislation that everything white liberals come up with is good either. But we're in a very particular moment of white backlash. Voter suppression laws, white backlash. It's pretty consistent right now that we're seeing it across the board, and it's stunning how far it's already gone in just a short period of time.
Yes.
Ben, can I add to that?
Yeah.
I just want to say, just as a white individual, so you're going to have to remind me of the story to y'all state, but when the flag was torn down, who was the black woman?
They took it down, it's here now.
Bree. Climbed the pole, right? Yeah. And so that was practiced, right? That was prepared. And she practiced climbing that pole, go up there and pull that flag down. But there was a white man, remind me his name?
I don't remember his name.
I don't either.
Yeah.
So, but he was part of that, right? And there's a fence around that pole. So she climbed that pole, pulled the flag down, and he was there to protect her, to be with her. So he's an ally, right? So us as white people, we're allies. We're all allies. We're all allies. But how does somebody know that I'm an ally? How does somebody know I'm an ally? My black and brown friends in this room, how do you know I'm an ally? You might because I'm here talking about it, but I'm in the grocery store with you. How do you know that I'm an ally? That's for me to figure out how to communicate that to you, right? And I have my ways, but I'm not going to tell you. But so my next point is, so he was an ally and he was standing outside that fence, but when the police showed up and they were going to get her down, he stepped inside the fence, right? So now he's still an ally, but all of a sudden the police are like, well, we can get her down. We'll tase the pole, right? We're going to tase the pole. We'll get her down. So what did he do? He put his hand on the pole, right? Because now he just became a co-conspirator. Because the police are not going to tase a pole with a white man's hand on it. He just became a co-conspirator. So us white folks, what does it look like? We're allies. What does it look now to become a co-conspirator? And I want to be a co-conspirator, and I'm still learning that, and I don't really know what that looks like yet, but I want to be a co-conspirator, and I want to be an ally so that people know that I am, and they can tell when they look at me.
Thank you, Kim. We're almost out of time. Any final questions? Yeah, here we go, right?
My name's Jane. I just have a question, practical question about the course, and some folks, I'm a pastor, associate pastor across the street, and some folks from our church attended the White Privilege Conference a year ago in Charlotte, and the organizers of the conference made it clear this is not for beginners. And hearing from y'all, you came into this with some awareness, some sensitivity, some insight already, even though that your wigs were blown off and the course took you to a whole other level. But I guess I wonder about the beginners, and what kind of preparation needs to happen before somebody takes this course?
Since it's my baby, I'll let them answer first. Yeah. Maybe I'll give you a better insight. Anybody want to say something about that?
would say, again, that there's space for everyone. I'm tired of the excuse, well, I'm not mature enough yet. People face this no matter their age, no matter how long you've been on this earth or in America. Whiteness is here, and it's our system. They face it. So I wouldn't say, oh, it's just not for them. I want to introduce it for them. Or, oh, you gotta do all this work first before you actually listen to Black voices. Like, what? No, they need to start listening, and this is just a perfect way. There is grace in this. We're not like, feel bad right now. There is a space where, okay, what are you feeling? Whatever you're feeling is legitimate. You don't have to conjure with it. And I would say, Black people have to face oppression and face disadvantage every day. And as white people, we have this, I'm upset because I face this, and I hear this excuse a lot, and excuses that we, as white people, we can just jump in and jump out. Like, we can use it as just entertainment even. Like, if I want to hang out with my white friends, if I want to have, white male privilege, I can just go right back. And I can act like nothing happened. But people of color they don't get that choice. They don't get that choice. So even the ability that, we could listen if we want to, but we have to wait. I would just say, just give space to people. And I mean, again, people are going to be at different parts of the journey, but I would say, even introducing it, they might do some work beforehand. I mean, I didn't take the course the first time the course went around. I did the course when I was ready. But even introducing it gets that wheel turning so that they will take it, rather than, I should wait.
Any other want to talk about that? I know each of you probably have people who come to the group course from very different places. I know that in leading, I've had people come in who are very conservative, Republicans, all the way to very liberal people. And what I find is that the liberal folks struggle even more. Because the course is built based on a journey that I took, and I was a white liberal when I took the journey, so it chews people up. It's Malcolm X says that white conservatives are wolves and white liberals are foxes, and one tells you exactly where you stand, and the other smiles at you, making you think that they are on your team, and actually turn around, they both want to eat you. And so he says, look, don't be fooled by the white liberal fox. And when you start to say that to a conservative who's a white in the group, they're like, oh yeah, I've always known those liberals were problematic. And so it gives them space. It gives them, and so we watch a movie, documentary 13, and right when you get into it, you realize quite quickly that Bill and Hillary Clinton, I don't know if you remember, somebody called Bill Clinton one of the first Black president. I thought that was racist when they said it. It is still today. But Bill and Hillary Clinton were as responsible for mass incarceration as any politician in American history, right? And so already you're 2 minutes into the movie and you realize everybody's indicted. So when everybody's indicted, it doesn't matter what your politics are. We got to work on this whiteness thing regardless, right? So that's part of the invitation of the course, I think. And the other thing I'll say is, even the 101 anti-racism trainings that I've experienced, a lot of them are missing the spiritual element. Almost none of them do white affinity groups. Almost none of them are small group processes that have a container of spiritual practices and a trained facilitator. And so when Seth's talking about grace space, and they're talking about the space of grace, the whole intention is to create a space where the readings provoke racial stress by putting up a mirror of what whiteness looks like through the eyes of Black people.
but then the container of the small group and the facilitator and the autobiography and the prayer practices and meditation allow time for that stress to sit and then evolve into growth instead of shutting white people down. And the white affinity group prevents them from hurting people of color. Right? So the whole point is to give white people the space to go through this journey and grow and not shut down or hurt black people. And it's not always successful, but I mean, I think that's the invitation. I would say the readings, yeah, sure, the readings call people to their highest and best. They're not overly academic. There's movies and other things too that are more accessible. They do call people to do work, and I think that's back to the point. I mean, white people need to be doing work on their whiteness, and we've got to stop giving them a free pass. We've got to stop giving ourselves and our own community a free pass on that. So. Sandra, with that, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. Wow, this has been awesome. It's a lot of information. Thank you, and I want to make one clarification. Clarification. When my buddy here, Ms. Williamson, Ann Williamson, was speaking about, your work, and she says that you would have been, right, she said lynched. She didn't say you would, she said you would have been lynched, okay? Yeah, absolutely. But yeah, so that I admire you for what you're doing. I thank God for what you're doing, and the rest of you. It's very important work that needs to be done. As a black woman, I tell you, I don't want to be white, and I don't want to act white or think white, but this is important work, and I appreciate you all coming here to Rockville to teach us, share with us, and I look forward to perhaps spending more time with you somehow. So thank you again. Thank you.